Hello, welcome back to the channel. So out of all the modes in StarRail, MoC does definitely feel like the most outdated one. Like, Pure Fiction does feel mostly fine, especially with the new grip mechanic that I got a little while ago, making it feel a bit more unique from the other modes. Apocalyptic Shadow also feels fine, I think, with it being like the main sort of raid type of mode, and us actually fighting most of like the weekly bosses, which we don't really do in a lot of the other modes. But with MoC, you can tell that it is like one of the first things that they made just because of how basic it is compared to the other modes. Now, not every mode has to be like a super complex mode with like 10 different things going on, but it should at least feel like there's something going on, like, you know, and it's just really boring right now. Like, I do think the MoC would be way better if it worked like the other two modes where there is a selection of buffs instead of just one, like, overarching buff for the entire, like, all the floors. Because while I don't necessarily think having a buff that benefits the new character is that big of a problem, because, I mean, all of these games do that, but it being, like, the only one, I think, is kind of restrictive with just, like, how relevant the buffs are. Since if you don't have the characters that interact with the buffs, you're just kind of screwed, you know? Like, unless you just have, like, an insane build, you know? Like, maybe they could have 3 options for overall buffs. Like, 1 that benefits the new character, and then 2 for, like, other archetypes. But at the same time, like, I don't think the MoC needs, like, too many changes, because I do actually like that it is more focused on, like, base combat than the other modes are. However, I do still think that it should be, like, sort of reworked, like how Pure Fiction was, to make it a bit more interesting. One other change that I could maybe see is, you know, which I heard from somewhere, I just can't remember where, is to have multiple options for fights on each side. Like, maybe one side has 2 or 3 options for fights, and then the other side has the same thing. I think that, you know, this would help with the feeling of you're just kind of screwed sometimes, like if you don't have certain characters. Like, as an example, Flame River Boss, which is in MoC right now, you kind of really need AoE if you don't want to just get one shot, you know? It's like, if you just don't have AoE characters, you probably are not beating the boss. Now, you could say that people should just invest in characters better, which I do kind of agree with, because I think that a lot of people's problems would be solved if they just had better builds and also better team building. But at the same time, like, you shouldn't just feel completely screwed if you don't have certain characters. Like, there should be, like, some middle ground. Like, it should be harder, but it shouldn't just feel, like, impossible, you know? I also do think that the devs just don't really know what to do with MoC, which is why they're just resorting to increasing the health to an insane degree. Because increasing the health isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like, it makes sense that as the game goes on, the enemies would get stronger. The problem is, like, how fast it's going up and how much it's going up. Because, like, only increasing the HP and doing nothing else is just, like, doesn't make it harder. It just makes it more annoying. Obviously, you know, there have been, like, more, you know, enemies that do more damage. Like, none of the actual mechanics of MoC have changed at all. It's just the HP, you know. One other thing, I don't know if this is just me, but a lot of the time, like, 3-starring the last floor, or even, like, the last 2 floors, just doesn't really feel worth it a lot of the time for the reward you get. This does also kind of apply to Pure Fiction and Apocalyptic Shadow, but I feel like it's not as bad for those, since the rewards are a bit better there, and I also just think those modes are more enjoyable. So I would say maybe to just, like, increase the reward for MoC overall so it feels more worth it to actually do, especially if we're only going to get 5 stars, because I'm fine with them only doing 5 stars if the rewards we are getting are proportional to that, and right now we just aren't really getting that. Now, that could partially be blamed on the lack of events and not necessarily MoC itself, which is kind of true, but I mean, I think they could just do both, you know. They could do more events and also increase the rewards in MoC, you know. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. And I don't know, I really do hope that they change MoC soon, because the other 2 modes feel mostly fine, but I think that MoC is just, like, the main thing that a lot of people have issues with, which I think is, like, kind of makes sense since it's, like, the main mode that people seem to talk about. And like I said, you can tell that it is one of the first things they made, and I do hope that they change it before they make a new mode, because I'm pretty sure that if they make a new one, MoC is probably just going to be abandoned. I'm just going to be honest. But I don't know, the thing is that, like, and this is kind of off topic, are they even going to make a new endgame mode? Because I feel like I would kind of rather them improve the modes that we already have than make a new, like, endgame mode. I don't really think the game needs a new, like, endgame mode. I would rather them see, like, a new side mode or something, sort of like in the same vein that Simulated Universe is for, like, weekly stuff, just something that isn't that, because we've already gotten so many expansions of that, and I do kind of just want to see something besides that, you know? I'm not necessarily opposed to a new endgame mode. I just feel like the devs see, like, the trio that we already have as a fine system, I just don't really see a reason to change it. Because, I mean, what would you even do for another mode? Maybe like a raid kind of mode, but Apocalypse Shadow already kind of is that. The only thing I can really think of is like a tower mode, kind of like what Zenless has, where there's like an infinite number of floors that get harder and harder the higher you go, and you can try and see like, you know, how far you can get, what sort of score you can get. Obviously, you know, there's like base rewards that you can get, but you can still go past those rewards, you know. Like, that is maybe the only thing I can really see working, but even then I would still kind of just rather them change the current modes first. I mean, they could do both of those things at the same time, but I just not really sure that would actually happen, you know. Anyway, back to MoC. I do hope that it actually gets a rework soon, kind of like Pure Fiction had, because it just kind of feel like MoC has basically just been abandoned. Like, it's kind of just in maintenance mode right now. Like, they just change it every like so often because they have to. Like, what has MoC gotten? It starts you at like a higher floor now. They increase the reward like a bit, and I think that's kind of it. The only thing that really ever changes is just the enemies and the health pool and like the actual buff of the thing. But actually, the actual like mechanics of how the thing works just hasn't changed at all, which I just really hope that it does, because it's just so boring right now. I don't know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.